Isaiah Washington stood frozen in the doorway of chaos. Paint splattered across white Victorian walls like blood spatter at a crime scene. Overturned furniture, feathers from shredded pillows floating through the air like ash. But it wasn't the destruction that made his breath catch. It was the fort. 3 6-year-old girls had built a barricade around their father's photograph, protecting it with their small bodies, like soldiers guarding fallen ground. "You can't make us like you!" Grace screamed, hurling a toy truck that clattered at his feet. Her face was streaked with tears and paint. "We don't want another nanny! We want our daddy!" Behind her, Faith and Hope stood silent, trembling. 19 caregivers had run from this room in 8 months. 19 adults had looked at these children and seen monsters. Isaiah saw 3 drowning girls trying to keep their heads above water. He knelt slowly to their eye level. His deep voice cut through their rage like a hymn through thunder. "That's a mighty fine fort you built to protect your daddy's picture." Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 8 months earlier, Victoria Sinclair had believed she could control anything. At 38, she'd inherited Sinclair Pharmaceuticals when her husband Michael died, transforming grief into empire building. The company her late husband's family had built now consumed her. 80-hour weeks, board meetings that bled into midnight, acquisition deals signed while her daughters slept. But she couldn't control 3 6-year-old girls who missed their father. Michael had been 40 when lung cancer took him. 40 years old, with a laugh that filled rooms and hands that built swing sets on Saturday mornings. He'd died on a Tuesday in March, holding Victoria's hand, whispering that she was strong enough to do this alone. He'd been wrong. Victoria stood now in her corner office on the 45th floor, staring at her phone. 19 missed calls from the house. Her assistant, Margaret, knocked softly, entering with coffee Victoria wouldn't drink. "That's the 19th caregiver this year," Margaret said gently. "Ms. Sinclair, the agency says they're out of candidates. No one wants to work with my daughters." Victoria's voice cracked. "No one wants to work with my broken children." "They're not broken. They're grieving." Victoria's carefully constructed facade finally shattered. Tears came hot and fast, the kind she'd held back for 8 months. "So am I, Margaret. God help me, so am I. But I have a company to run. I have shareholders and employees and board members who think a woman can't handle this job. I can't fall apart." "Maybe falling apart is exactly what you need to do." Margaret pulled up a file on her tablet. "There's one more candidate, Isaiah Washington. 52 years old, 25 years of experience specializing in traumatized children. He's never quit on a family. Not once." Victoria studied the photo. A distinguished black man with silver at his temples and the kindest eyes she'd ever seen. Something in his face spoke of deep understanding, of someone who'd walked through fire and come out tempered, not destroyed. "A man?" Victoria hesitated. "For 3 little girls?" "Ms. Sinclair, with respect, maybe what your daughters need isn't someone who follows the rules. Maybe they need someone who understands that sometimes love looks different than we expect." Victoria thought of Michael, how he'd read bedtime stories in ridiculous voices, how he'd taught the girls to swing so high they felt like they were flying, how they'd built that fort in the backyard where they'd pretend to be pirates, how empty the house felt without him. "Send him immediately," Victoria whispered. "Please, before I lose them too." The mansion's living room looked like a war zone when Isaiah arrived. Margaret had warned him during the drive from Roxbury. "They're challenging," she'd said carefully, the way people do when they mean something far worse. But Isaiah Washington had worked with children who'd survived house fires, divorce wars, and foster care nightmares. 3 grieving little girls didn't frighten him. What broke his heart was how hard they were trying not to need anyone. Grace launched the first attack the moment he stepped through the doorway. A paint-filled water balloon exploded against the wall inches from his head, splattering his shirt with blue. Faith darted behind the overturned sofa, silent as a ghost. Hope climbed onto the marble mantelpiece with the terrifying confidence of a child who'd stopped caring about consequences. "Food fight!" Grace shrieked, reaching for another balloon. "Get out! Get out! Get out!" Isaiah didn't yell, didn't chase them, didn't try to restore order or assert authority. Instead, he walked calmly to the middle of the chaos and sat down cross-legged on the paint-stained Persian rug. He unscrewed his thermos and poured hot chocolate into 4 small cups he'd brought in his bag. The girls froze mid-destruction, confused by this unexpected response. "You know," Isaiah said conversationally, as if sitting in the middle of a disaster zone was the most natural thing in the world. "When my wife Ruth died, my son Marcus tore apart his bedroom, ripped every poster off the walls, broke his trophies, threw his books out the window." He took a slow sip from his cup. He was 18 years old, but he felt about as small as you three look right now. Hope stopped climbing. Faith peeked over the sofa's edge. Grace stood frozen with a balloon in her hand, paint dripping onto her shoes. "This here's what my wife used to make when somebody was hurting real bad," Isaiah continued, gesturing to the thermos. "She called it liquid hugs, got chocolate, cinnamon, a little vanilla, and the secret ingredient." "What's the secret ingredient?" Hope whispered. Her voice was so small, Isaiah had to strain to hear it. "Love, baby girl. Just love. Can't fix the hurt, but it makes carrying it a little easier." He set the cups down. "Now, I brought enough for all of us. You don't have to drink it if you don't want. You don't have to like me if you don't want. But I'm going to sit here either way." Grace's grip on the balloon loosened slightly. "The other nannies always yelled at us. I ain't here to yell at you. I'm here to sit with you. There's a difference." "You're weird," Grace said suspiciously, but she lowered the balloon. "Probably," Isaiah agreed. "But weird's better than mean, don't you think?" Faith emerged from behind the sofa, still clutching a teddy bear that looked like it had been through its own war. She moved toward the hot chocolate with the caution of a wild animal approaching food. "That was my daddy's bear," she said quietly, the first word she'd spoken. "Grandma gave it to him when he was little. Your daddy had good taste. That's a fine-looking bear. His name is Courage." Faith's voice wobbled. "Daddy said we should name him that because bears are brave, and brave things help you when you're scared." "Your daddy was a wise man. Sounds like he understood that being scared is okay, long as you got something to hold on to." Hope climbed down from the mantelpiece carefully, watching Isaiah with wide, evaluating eyes. She was the smallest of the three, with her father's dark hair and her mother's determined chin. "Are you going to leave like all the others?" The question cut deeper than any paint balloon could have. Isaiah met her gaze steadily, giving her the respect of complete honesty. "Baby girl, I can't promise I'll be here forever." "Nobody can promise that. Life don't work that way. But I can promise I won't leave because you're sad. I won't leave because you're angry. I won't leave because you break things or make messes or test me every single day to see if I'm really staying. Those are exactly the reasons I came." Grace finally dropped the balloon. It hit the floor with a wet splat. "Our daddy said he'd never leave. He promised. Then he died." "I know, sweetheart, and that wasn't his fault. Death took him. He didn't choose to go. But what if you die too?" Hope's voice climbed higher, panic threading through it. "What if everybody we love dies?" Isaiah opened his arms slowly, an invitation rather than a demand. "Then we love them anyway, because the hurt we feel when someone's gone, that's just proof of how much we loved them when they were here. And that love doesn't die, baby girl. It stays right here." He touched his chest. where nobody can take it away. Hope broke first. She ran to him and buried her face in his shoulder, sobbing with the kind of grief that had been locked away for 8 months. Faith followed, still clutching Courage the bear. Grace held out the longest, her small face twisted with the effort of maintaining control, of being strong for her sisters. "I'm the oldest," she choked out. "I have to take care of them. I have to be brave like Daddy wanted." "Sweetheart, being brave doesn't mean not crying. Being brave means crying when you need to and getting up the next morning anyway. Your daddy didn't want you to be strong all by yourself. He'd want you to share that weight." Grace's shoulders shook. Then she too crossed the destroyed living room and let herself be held by this stranger who somehow understood what no one else had. That their anger wasn't the problem. Their pain was, and pain needed witnessing, not correction. They cried together on the floor, surrounded by paint and feathers and broken things. Isaiah held all 3 girls and let them empty out months of grief they'd been carrying alone. He didn't shush them or tell them it would be okay. He just rocked them gently and hummed an old hymn his grandmother used to sing. "His eye is on the sparrow, low and steady as a heartbeat." When Victoria came home 2 hours later, she found them in the kitchen. All 4 of them. Isaiah was teaching her daughters how to make cornbread while they talked about Michael. Really talked, in a way Victoria hadn't been able to do since he died. "Daddy used to make breakfast on Sundays," Grace was saying, measuring flour carefully. "But his pancakes always came out wrong, too thick or too thin or burned." "We ate them anyway," Faith added softly, "because Daddy made them with love." "That's the most important ingredient," Isaiah said, checking the oven temperature. "Love makes even the mistakes taste good." Hope looked up, flour on her nose. "Mommy, we're making cornbread. Mr. Isaiah is teaching us the secret family recipe his mama taught him." Victoria stood in the doorway, briefcase still in her hand, staring at a scene she'd thought impossible. Her daughters, cooking, talking about Michael without crying, looking almost peaceful. "Ms. Sinclair." Isaiah straightened respectfully, wiping his hands on a towel. "Hope you don't mind we started dinner. The girls said you usually get home around this time." Victoria's voice failed her. Tears she'd been holding back all day finally spilled over. "How did you... They've been hurting real bad, ma'am. And sometimes hurt looks like anger. But underneath, they're just 3 little girls who miss their daddy something fierce. Just needed somebody to sit with that hurt instead of trying to fix it." Grace ran to her mother, wrapping paint-stained arms around Victoria's waist. "Mommy, Mr. Isaiah didn't yell at us even when we threw paint, and he made us hot chocolate. And he said it's okay to miss Daddy. Is it? Is it really okay?" Victoria sank to her knees, pulling all 3 daughters close. "Oh, baby. Oh, my sweet girls. Yes, yes, it's okay to miss him. I miss him every second of every day." "Then why don't you talk about him?" Faith asked. "Why do you cry in your room where you think we can't hear?" The question shattered something in Victoria's chest. She'd been so busy being strong, being the CEO, being the one who had it all together, that she'd forgotten her daughters needed to see her grieve too. "Because I thought if I started crying, I'd never stop. I thought I had to be strong for you." Isaiah's gentle voice cut through her breaking. "Ma'am, those babies don't need you to be strong. They need you to be real. They need to know Mama's heart is broken too, and that it's okay for hearts to be broken." That's how healing starts, by being honest about the hurt. Victoria looked up at this man she'd hired less than 3 hours ago, this stranger who'd somehow seen straight to the core of what her family needed. Will you help us? Not just with the girls, but help me too. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be both mother and father. I don't know how to grieve and parent at the same time." Ma'am, you don't have to be both mother and father. You just have to be their mama, and they just need you to be human with them. Can you do that?" Victoria nodded, crying openly now in front of her daughters for the first time since Michael's funeral. The girls pressed closer, all of them crying together, all of them finally letting the grief out into the open where it could begin to heal. The cornbread timer went off. "Well now," Isaiah said gently, "how about we eat some of this good food while it's hot? And after dinner, I got something I want to show you all. Something that might help with the missing." That night, after dinner, Isaiah pulled out a leather-bound notebook. "This here's what we're going to call the Daddy Book. Every night before bed, each of you's going to tell me one memory of your daddy. Just one. Could be something big or something small. And I'm going to write it down in here. That way, we make sure we never forget. We keep him alive in here." He tapped the notebook. "In all our hearts." "Can I go first?" Faith asked quietly. "Course you can, baby. Daddy used to sing 'You Are My Sunshine' when we had bad dreams. He said sunshine scares away the monsters." Isaiah wrote it down carefully in his neat handwriting. "That's beautiful. He was right. Sunshine does scare away monsters. And you know what? You three are your daddy's sunshine. That's why you got those names, Grace, Faith, and Hope. Your daddy gave you those names because he knew you'd be lights in the dark." For the first time in 8 months, the Sinclair house felt like a home again. The transformation happened slowly, like winter thawing into spring. 3 weeks after Isaiah arrived, the girls stopped testing him every morning. 4 weeks in, they began asking when he'd arrive instead of hoping he wouldn't. By week 6, they'd created their own ritual, greeting him at the door with hugs that nearly knocked him over. But the real turning point came on a Saturday morning in October, when Grace asked the question that had been locked inside all 3 of them since their father died. "Mr. Isaiah, can we go to the swing set?" The backyard had become forbidden territory. Michael had built that swing set himself, spending 3 weekends measuring, sawing, sanding until his hands blistered. He'd painted it robin's egg blue because that was Hope's favorite color. The girls had watched from the kitchen window, bringing him lemonade, handing him tools, believing their father would push them on those swings forever. 8 months of weeds had swallowed it whole. Isaiah stood at the kitchen window, studying the overgrown jungle that had once been a father's love made manifest. Victoria stood beside him, coffee cup trembling in her hands. "They haven't touched it since the funeral," she whispered. "I couldn't bear to look at it, couldn't bear to tear it down, so I just let it disappear. Maybe it's time to bring it back." The 5 of them spent that entire Saturday in the yard. Isaiah brought work gloves, pruning shears, wood stain from the hardware store. The girls wore their oldest clothes and Michael's old work shirts, sleeves rolled up like capes. They pulled weeds until their hands were green-stained and dirty. They scraped rust off chains. They repainted the blue that had faded to gray. And while they worked, they talked to Michael. "Daddy, we're fixing your swing set," Hope called up to the clouds. "It got real messy without you, but we're making it pretty again." Faith ran her small hand along the wooden beam where Michael had carved all their names. "Remember when you carved this, Daddy? You said it meant we'd always be together, even when we grew up and moved away. You didn't know you'd be the one who moved away." Grace, always the most guarded, finally let herself feel it all. She pressed her forehead against the swing set's main post and sobbed. "I'm so mad at you, Daddy. You promised you'd see us grow up. You promised you'd walk us down the aisle when we got married. You promised forever, and forever only lasted 6 years. Isaiah knelt beside her, one hand on her shaking shoulder. "You got a right to be angry, baby girl. Anger's just love with nowhere to go. Your daddy would understand. But it's not fair to be mad at him, Grace choked out. He didn't want to die. No, he didn't. But you're still allowed to feel what you feel. Grief ain't logical. It ain't fair. It just is. Victoria watched her eldest daughter rage against the unfairness of death, watched Isaiah hold space for that rage without trying to calm it or correct it. Something cracked open inside her chest, the realization that she'd been angry too. Angry at Michael for leaving, angry at God for taking him, angry at herself for every missed dinner, every late night at the office, every moment she'd chosen work over the man she loved. I'm angry too, Victoria said suddenly. All four of them turned to look at her. I'm so angry, Grace, at your father for dying, at myself for not being there enough when he was sick, at the universe for being so cruel. The girls stared at their mother as if seeing her for the first time. Victoria Sinclair, always composed, always in control, admitting to rage and failure and human weakness. You're mad at Daddy? Hope asked, confused. I'm furious with him, Victoria admitted, tears streaming. For not fighting harder. For giving up, for leaving me to do this alone. And I know that's not fair, because he fought as hard as he could. But grief isn't fair, baby. Mr. Isaiah's right about that. Grace crossed to her mother and took her hand. It's okay to be mad, Mommy. Mr. Isaiah says so. They finished the swing set as the sun set golden over Boston. When the last coat of paint dried, Isaiah hung a small wooden plaque he'd carved that week. It read, "Built with love by Michael Sinclair, a father who knew that some things last forever." Faith touched the plaque reverently. Can we swing now? I think your daddy would want that very much. They swung as the evening turned purple, all three girls soaring high, laughing and crying at the same time. Isaiah pushed them gently, a rhythm like breathing. Victoria sat on the porch steps, watching her daughters reclaim joy they'd thought was buried with their father. Isaiah eventually sat beside her, both of them quiet for a long moment. You did good today, Ms. Sinclair. I fell apart in front of my children. You were human in front of your children. There's a difference. Victoria turned to look at him. This man who'd walked into their shattered lives and somehow started gluing pieces back together. Isaiah, can I ask you something personal? Yes, ma'am. How did you survive it? Losing Ruth? Isaiah was quiet for so long Victoria thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, I didn't survive it. Not at first. I drowned in it for a long time. Went through the motions for Marcus's sake, but inside I was dead as Ruth was. What changed? Marcus. He was 18, about to go to college. One night he came to me crying, said he couldn't leave me alone because I'd die of loneliness, and I realized my grief was stealing his future, so I made a choice. I chose to honor Ruth by loving harder, by taking care of other people's children the way she took care of Marcus. By making her life mean something more than just the ending of it. Is that why you do this work? Part of it. The other part is selfish, if I'm being honest. When I'm helping a family heal, I feel close to Ruth again, like she's working through me, like she's still here in some way that matters. Victoria looked at her daughters, swinging free and wild, finally able to play without guilt. Michael would have liked you. I think I would have liked him too, ma'am. That night, the Daddy book grew by 3 more entries. But this time, Victoria wrote one too. Isaiah sat with the whole family in the girls' bedroom, reading aloud what they'd all written. Grace. Today, Daddy would have been proud of us for fixing his swing set. I think he was watching from heaven and smiling. Faith. Daddy, I'm not scared to talk about you anymore. Mr. Isaiah says talking about people we love keeps them alive in our hearts. So I'm going to talk about you every day. Hope. Daddy, we swung so high today. I bet you could see us from heaven. Did you see how brave I was? I didn't even cry until the good kind of crying. Then Isaiah read Victoria's entry, his voice gentle with understanding. Michael, I'm learning to live in the world without you. I'm learning that loving you and moving forward aren't opposite things. I'm learning from a man named Isaiah what you tried to teach me all along, that being present matters more than being perfect. Thank you for loving me enough to forgive me for all the times I chose work over us. I'm choosing differently now. For them, for me, for the memory of what we built together. The girls climbed into their mother's lap, all of them too big for it, but needing it anyway. Isaiah closed the daddy book and set it on the nightstand. Mr. Isaiah, Faith said sleepily. Are you going to stay forever? Victoria's eyes met Isaiah's across the room, and something passed between them that neither was quite ready to name. I'm going to stay as long as your family needs me, baby girl. We'll always need you, Hope mumbled, already half asleep. After the girls drifted off, Victoria walked Isaiah to the door, their nightly routine now, but tonight felt different. The air between them was charged with something neither could quite acknowledge. Isaiah, Victoria started, then stopped. I don't know how to thank you for what you've given us. You don't need to thank me, Miss Sinclair. This family's given me something too. Purpose, family, a reason to love hard again. They stood in the doorway longer than necessary, both aware they were crossing into territory that felt dangerous and necessary all at once. Same time tomorrow? Victoria asked. Same time tomorrow, Isaiah confirmed. But as he walked to his car, both of them felt the truth settling like morning dew. This was becoming something more than a job, more than grief counseling, more than temporary help. This was becoming family, and that terrified them both. The photograph appeared on social media on a Tuesday morning in November. Someone had captured Isaiah and the girls at Boston Common, all four of them laughing as they fed the ducks. Hope was on Isaiah's shoulders. Faith held his hand. Grace walked beside them, animated and alive in a way she hadn't been since her father died. It was a beautiful image of healing. The comments section turned it into something ugly. By noon, the local news had picked it up. Billionaire CEO leaves daughters with male caregiver, child safety experts weigh in. By 3 o'clock, Victoria's office was flooded with calls. By evening, 3 former caregivers had been interviewed, their faces pixelated, their voices distorted to protect their identities while they destroyed Isaiah's reputation. Those girls need a woman's influence, said the nanny who'd quit after 2 days. A mother figure, not a man. I question Mr. Sinclair's judgment, said another. Leaving 3 vulnerable girls alone with a strange man in this day and age? The third was the cruelest. He's probably after her money. These situations never end well. Mark my words. The racial undertones were never explicit, but they hummed beneath every word like a current you couldn't see but could definitely feel. The news segment showed Isaiah's photograph prominently, a black man with 3 white children. They didn't need to say what they were implying. The viewers filled in the blanks themselves. Victoria's hands shook as she watched the coverage in her office. Margaret stood beside her, equally horrified. This is character assassination, Margaret said. Isaiah's record is spotless. 25 years without a single complaint. They don't care about his record. They care about clicks and controversy. Victoria grabbed her coat. I need to get home. I need to warn him before... Her phone rang. The board chair. Victoria. We need to talk about your household situation. The board is concerned this publicity might affect company perception." "My household situation?" Victoria's voice went cold. "You mean the man who's given my daughters their lives back?" "I mean the optics of a single female CEO with a male caregiver. People are asking questions." "Then people can mind their own damn business, Richard." "Victoria, be reasonable. The stock dropped 2 points this afternoon. Shareholders are nervous. Perhaps if you hired a female caregiver instead." "Isaiah Washington is the best thing that's happened to my family since Michael died. I will not fire him to satisfy shareholders who know nothing about grief or healing or what my daughters have been through." "Think about your position. Think about the company." "I am thinking about my position. As a mother, that comes first. If the board has a problem with that, they can find a new CEO." She hung up before he could respond and drove home faster than she should have, her heart hammering against her ribs. Isaiah was in the kitchen when she arrived, teaching the girls how to make his grandmother's sweet potato pie. They were covered in flour and laughing, completely unaware that the world outside had decided to judge them. "Mommy!" Hope ran to her, leaving floury handprints on Victoria's business suit. "We're making dessert for Thanksgiving. Mr. Isaiah says his grandmama's recipe is magic." Victoria pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of cinnamon and childhood. "It looks wonderful, baby." But Isaiah saw her face, saw the fear and fury warring there. "Girls, why don't you wash up while I talk to your mama for a minute?" Once they were alone, Victoria pulled out her phone and showed him the news coverage. Isaiah watched, without expression, his jaw tight but his eyes calm. He'd seen this before. He'd lived this before. "I'm so sorry," Victoria whispered. "They're making you sound like a black man who doesn't belong in your house." Isaiah's voice was quiet but steady. "Miss Sinclair, I've been black in America for 52 years. This ain't nothing new. It's not right. It's not fair. No, ma'am, it's not. But fair went out the window the day Ruth died, and I couldn't afford the insulin that might have saved her. Fair left when Marcus got pulled over 6 times in 1 year for matching a description. Fair's been gone a long time, but we keep fighting anyway." Victoria wanted to rage, to sue, to burn down every news station that had participated in this character assassination. Instead, she asked the question that terrified her most. "Are you going to leave?" Isaiah looked at her for a long moment. "Is that what you want?" "God, no. Isaiah, you've given us our lives back. You've taught my daughters how to grieve, how to heal, how to live again. You've taught me how to be their mother instead of just their provider. I can't lose you too." "Then you won't, ma'am. But I need you to understand something. This is about to get harder before it gets easier. People gonna talk. They're gonna judge. They're gonna make assumptions about me, about you, about what's happening in this house. Are you ready for that? I don't care what people say. You will when it starts affecting your girls, when their classmates ask questions, when teachers look at you differently, when the PTA whispers behind your back. Are you ready to stand up to all of that?" Victoria thought of Michael, how he'd stood up to his own mother when she'd disapproved of their marriage, how he'd chosen love over approval every single time. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm ready. You've stood by us. Now I'll stand by you." The girls returned then, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Is everything okay?" Grace asked, her old anxiety creeping back into her voice. Isaiah knelt to their level, pulling all 3 into his arms. "Girls, I need to talk to you about something. Some people are saying things about me on the news, saying I don't belong here with you." "That's stupid," Hope said immediately. "You belong here more than anybody." "Why are they saying that?" Faith asked quietly. Isaiah chose his words carefully. Because some people in this world judge folks by how they look instead of who they are inside. They see that my skin is brown and yours is white, and they think that means something it doesn't. You mean because you're black? Grace said bluntly. Yes, baby girl. That's exactly what I mean. That's racism, Grace said, her young face fierce with indignation. We learned about it in school. About Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and how people used to treat black people really badly just because of their skin color. Still do sometimes, sweetheart. Just in sneakier ways. Faith pressed closer to him. Are they going to make you leave? Not if I have anything to say about it, Victoria interjected. Mr. Isaiah is part of our family, and families stick together no matter what other people think. But what if people are mean to us? Hope asked in a small voice. Isaiah tilted her chin up gently. Then we hold our heads high and remember the truth. The truth is, we love each other. The truth is, your daddy would want you to be with people who care about you, no matter what they look like. The truth is stronger than lies, always. But it takes courage to stand up for truth. Do you three think you're brave enough? All three girls nodded, their small faces set with determination that broke Victoria's heart and put it back together simultaneously. Then let's make a promise right now, Isaiah said. We promise to love each other no matter what anybody says. We promise to stand up for each other when people are unkind, and we promise to remember that family isn't about what you look like on the outside, it's about who shows up on the inside. Deal? Deal, the girls chorused. That night, after the pie was baked and the girls were in bed, Victoria and Isaiah sat in the darkened living room, both exhausted by the day's events. My son called, Isaiah said quietly. Marcus. He's worried about me getting too attached, worried about what happens when this job ends. Victoria's stomach dropped. Is this job ending? That's what I need to figure out, Ms. Sinclair. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being a job. Those girls in there, they feel like my grandbabies, and you. He trailed off, the unspoken truth hanging between them like smoke. And me? Victoria prompted, her voice barely a whisper. And you feel like family, ma'am, like someone I want to protect and support and stand beside. But I need to know, are you keeping me around because you need a caregiver? Or because you want me here? Victoria's heart raced. It had only been 8 months since Michael died. 8 months since she'd held her husband's hand as he took his last breath. Was it too soon to admit that she'd started looking forward to Isaiah's arrival each morning? That his laugh had become the sound she most wanted to hear? That somewhere in the grief and healing she'd started to fall for this gentle, wise man who'd walked through fire with her family? I want you here, she admitted. Not as an employee, as family, as someone who matters. Isaiah, I'm not ready to call this anything more than that. Michael's only been gone 8 months, and I still wake up reaching for him. But I know I don't want to face the world without you anymore. Isaiah reached across the space between them and took her hand. Then I'm staying. We'll figure out the rest as we go. But, Victoria, it was the first time he'd used her first name, you need to know that choosing me means choosing a hard road. People aren't going to understand. They're going to judge and whisper and make our lives difficult. Let them, Victoria said fiercely. Michael taught me that love is worth fighting for. And whatever this is becoming, it's worth fighting for too. They sat in the darkness, hands linked, both aware they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Outside, the city hummed with gossip and judgment. But inside, in the house where grief had nearly destroyed them all, something new was growing, something that looked like hope. The crisis came 3 weeks later, delivered in an official envelope from Child Protective Services. Victoria stood in her office, hands trembling as she read the complaint. Anonymous caller. Concerns about minor children in the care of an unrelated male. Request for immediate home investigation. The words blurred together, each one a hammer blow to the fragile peace they'd built. Her secretary buzzed. "Ms. Sinclair, there's a Dr. Helen Morrison on line 2. She says it's urgent regarding your daughters." Victoria's blood went cold. Helen Morrison, Michael's mother. The woman who'd been conspicuously absent from their lives since the funeral, who'd sent gifts but never visited, who'd blamed Victoria for not being at Michael's bedside enough during his final weeks. She picked up the phone with shaking hands. "Victoria." Helen's voice was crisp, controlled, the voice of a retired surgeon accustomed to authority. "I think we need to talk about the girls." "What about them?" "I've been following the news coverage. This situation with the male caregiver. His name is Isaiah Washington, and this situation, as you call it, has given your granddaughters their lives back. Has it? Or has it simply provided you with a convenient replacement for my son?" The accusation hung in the air like poison. Victoria felt rage building in her chest, hot and protective. "How dare you? How dare you judge what's happening in this house when you haven't been here once in 8 months? Because you made it clear I wasn't welcome." "Michael made it clear, Helen. Your son distanced himself from you years before he died, and you know why. Your need to control everything, to manage everyone's emotions, to decide what grief should look like. I raised that boy alone after his father died. I know what it takes to be a single parent. And I know that what those girls need is stability, family, not some stranger playing house." Victoria's voice dropped to something dangerous. "If you cared about those girls, you would have been here. You would have called. You would have asked how they were doing instead of filing complaints with CPS." Silence, long enough to be confirmation. "You did, didn't you? You filed that complaint." Helen's voice hardened. "I'm concerned about my granddaughter's welfare. As their blood relative, I have every right. You have no rights. You abandoned them when Michael died. You blamed me for his death, for not being there enough, and then you proved exactly the same. Where were you when Grace wouldn't speak for 2 weeks? Where were you when Faith stopped eating? Where were you when Hope started having nightmares so bad she'd wake up screaming? I was grieving my son. And we were grieving too. But we had to keep living. We had to keep going. And Isaiah helped us do that. He helped us survive when you couldn't be bothered to show up. I'm filing for emergency custody, Victoria. I have a lawyer. I have documentation of your work hours, the media coverage, the questionable judgment in hiring an unvetted male caregiver for 3 vulnerable girls. A judge will see a grandmother who's trying to steal children she never bothered to visit, who's using racism and fear to destroy a good man's reputation, who's more interested in control than love." Victoria hung up, her whole body shaking. Through her office window, Boston gleamed in afternoon sun, oblivious to the war being declared in corporate towers. Margaret appeared in the doorway. "The social worker's here. Patricia Jenkins from Child Protective Services. She's waiting in conference room B." Victoria straightened her jacket, wiped her eyes, and walked into battle. Patricia Jenkins was a black woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes and the tired bearing of someone who'd seen too much human suffering. She stood when Victoria entered, extending her hand. "Ms. Sinclair, thank you for meeting with me on short notice." "Do I have a choice?" "Everyone has choices. I'm here because we received a complaint about the welfare of your daughters. It's my job to investigate, not to judge. May I be frank with you?" Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. "I know Isaiah Washington. Not personally, but by reputation. My sister's children, Marcus and Jasmine, he cared for them 15 years ago when my sister was going through a difficult divorce. Those kids are in college now, thriving, and they still talk about the man who helped them through the hardest time of their lives." Hope flickered in Victoria's chest. "Then you know he's not..." I know what he is, but I still have to do my job. I need to see the home environment. I need to interview your daughters separately. I need to speak with Mr. Washington. This isn't personal. It's protocol. The investigation took 6 hours. Patricia arrived at the house that evening, declining dinner but accepting tea. She watched as Isaiah helped the girls with homework, noting the easy affection, the appropriate boundaries, the genuine care that radiated from every interaction. She interviewed Grace first, in the library with the door open. "How does Mr. Isaiah make you feel, sweetheart?" Grace looked at her with the solemn intensity of a 6-year-old who'd learned too young that adults couldn't always protect you. "Safe. Like even though Daddy's gone and everything's terrible, we're still going to be okay. Because Mr. Isaiah doesn't leave when things are hard. He stays." "Has Mr. Isaiah ever made you uncomfortable? Ever touched you in ways that felt wrong?" Grace's face scrunched in confusion. "You mean like hugs?" "Mr. Isaiah gives the best hugs." "They're like Daddy's hugs, but different. Daddy's hugs were tight and strong. Mr. Isaiah's hugs are gentle and warm. Both kinds are good." Faith was next, still clutching Courage the bear. "Faith, can you tell me what you do with Mr. Isaiah?" "We make cornbread, and we read the Daddy book. And he teaches us about brave ladies like Rosa Parks who stood up when things were unfair. And he pushes us on the swings Daddy built and lets us talk to Daddy in heaven while we swing." "Has Mr. Isaiah ever hurt you?" Faith shook her head vehemently. "Mr. Isaiah doesn't hurt people. He helps people stop hurting. He helped me talk again. I didn't talk for a long time after Daddy died, but Mr. Isaiah said it was okay to have words again, that Daddy would want me to use my voice." Hope was last, and Patricia had to hide a smile as the youngest Sinclair bounced into the chair with characteristic energy. "Miss Patricia, are you here because of the mean people on TV?" "I'm here to make sure you're safe and happy, honey." "We're super safe. Mr. Isaiah saved us, not like superheroes saved. Nobody was in danger from bad guys. He saved us from being sad forever. Mommy was sad, and we were sad, and everything was sad. But Mr. Isaiah taught us how to be sad and happy at the same time. Is that magic?" "I think that might be the best kind of magic there is." Patricia observed dinner, a chaos of laughter and spilled milk and stories about school. She saw Victoria and Isaiah move around each other with the practiced ease of partners, not employer and employee. She saw the girls light up when Isaiah praised them. She saw genuine family, regardless of blood or color. After the girls were in bed, Patricia sat with Victoria and Isaiah in the living room. "Off the record," she said carefully, "the complaint came from Dr. Helen Morrison, your mother-in-law." Victoria closed her eyes. "I know. She's filing for emergency custody. Claims you're an unfit mother who's exposing your children to inappropriate situations." "Those children are thriving," Isaiah said quietly. "Anyone with eyes can see that." "I know, and my report will reflect that. But Mr. Washington, you need to understand. You're going to be scrutinized in ways that wouldn't happen if you were white, if you were female, if you fit the mold of what people expect caregivers to look like. It's not fair. It's not right. But it's real. Ma'am, I've been black in America my whole life." Fair left the building a long time ago. Patricia turned to Victoria. "Dr. Morrison isn't fighting for those children. She's fighting because she's drowning in grief and doesn't know how to stay connected to her son except through them. She's not evil. She's broken. But broken people can still cause harm. What do I do? You fight. You document everything. You prepare for court. And you remember that sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who hurt us worst because they're too lost in their own pain to see ours." After Patricia left, promising her report would show no cause for concern, Victoria and Isaiah sat in exhausted silence. "This is because of me," Isaiah said finally. "If you had a white nanny, a female caregiver, none of this would be happening. If I had anyone else, my daughters would still be destroying their rooms and pushing people away. Isaiah, you gave us our lives back. That's worth fighting for. Is it worth losing your company, your reputation, your relationship with your mother-in-law?" Victoria thought of Michael. How he'd stood up to his mother when she'd tried to control their wedding, their parenting, their lives. How he'd chosen love over approval every single time. "Yes," she said firmly. "Michael taught me that some things are worth more than peace, worth more than appearances, worth more than other people's approval. You're one of those things. This family is one of those things." Isaiah reached across the space between them and took her hand. It was the first time he'd initiated touch, and Victoria felt the rightness of it down to her bones. "Then we fight together," he said. "Together," Victoria agreed. Neither of them knew that the hardest battle was still to come. The accident happened on a Saturday morning in late November, when Boston's autumn had surrendered to the first bite of winter. Isaiah had taken the girls to Boston Common for their weekly ritual, feeding the ducks, swinging on the playground, talking about Michael while the wind carried their words up to wherever he was watching from. Victoria had stayed home for once, actually taking a day off, sipping coffee in the kitchen and marveling at how quiet the house felt without her daughter's laughter filling it. She was reading the Daddy book, adding her own entry about how Michael used to make terrible scrambled eggs on Sunday mornings, when her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. She almost didn't answer. "Ms. Sinclair, this is Boston Medical Center. There's been an accident involving your family. You need to come immediately." The coffee cup slipped from her hands, shattering across the kitchen floor. Victoria didn't remember the drive to the hospital. Didn't remember parking or running through the emergency room doors. She only remembered the moment she saw her daughters in the waiting room, all three of them covered in blood that wasn't theirs. Grace saw her first and ran, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "Mommy! Mommy, it was a car. It jumped the curb and Mr. Isaiah, he pushed Hope out of the way and the car hit him and there was so much blood and he's not waking up." Victoria's world tilted sideways. She pulled all three girls into her arms, their small bodies shaking with terror and shock. Faith was silent again, the way she'd been before Isaiah arrived, her mouth open in a soundless scream. Hope kept repeating, "I should have died, not Mr. Isaiah," over and over like a prayer to a cruel God. A doctor approached, his face grave. "Ms. Sinclair, I'm Dr. Chen. Mr. Washington is in surgery. The impact caused severe trauma, broken ribs, collapsed lung, significant head injury. The next 48 hours are critical." "Is he going to die?" Grace asked, her 6-year-old voice small and terrified. Dr. Chen knelt to her level, his eyes kind but honest. "We're doing everything we can, sweetheart. He's a fighter, but his injuries are very serious." Victoria felt the world fracturing again, the same way it had when they told her Michael's cancer was terminal. How much loss could one family endure? How much grief could 3 little girls carry before they broke completely under its weight? Marcus arrived 20 minutes later, still in his hospital scrubs from his shift at Children's Hospital. His face was ashen, his hands shaking as he approached Victoria. "Where is he? What happened?" "Surgery. A drunk driver jumped the curb. Your father saved Hope's life." Marcus closed his eyes and Victoria saw the same terror she felt reflected back at her. This man, this good, gentle man, was losing his father the same way she'd lost her husband. The same way her daughters had lost theirs. "My dad survived my mother's death," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "He survived poverty and racism and every cruel thing this world threw at him. He has to survive this. He has to. They waited. Hours bled together in the fluorescent purgatory of the surgical waiting room. The girls refused to leave, setting up camp on the uncomfortable chairs, holding hands, whispering prayers they'd learned at St. Augustine Church. Pastor Williams arrived with half the congregation. The waiting room filled with black faces and white faces and brown faces, all of them united in loving the man who'd spent 25 years loving other people's children. They sang hymns softly. They held hands. They waited for God to decide whether Isaiah Washington's work on earth was finished. Helen Morrison arrived at midnight. Victoria looked up to see her former mother-in-law standing in the doorway, holding a basket of food, her face softer than Victoria had ever seen it. "I heard what happened," Helen said quietly. "I came as soon as I could." "You came to see if your custody case just got easier?" The words came out bitter, exhausted. "I came because that man saved my granddaughter's life. Because I've been a fool. Because I'm standing in a hospital waiting room watching you go through what I went through when Michael's father died, and I remember how alone I felt, how scared. And I don't want you to feel that way." Victoria stared at this woman who'd blamed her, attacked her, tried to steal her children. Saw in Helen's eyes the same thing she saw in her own mirror every morning. A mother drowning in grief, trying desperately not to take everyone else down with her. "Sit down, Helen. We're all terrified together." As the night wore on, the waiting room became a strange sanctuary. Helen sat with the girls, telling them stories about Michael as a boy that Victoria had never heard. Marcus shared memories of his mother Ruth, of how Isaiah had been both father and mother to him after she died. Victoria held hope, who couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop blaming herself for being alive when Isaiah might be dying. "Baby," Victoria whispered into her daughter's hair. "Mr. Isaiah didn't save you because he thought you were worth more than him. He saved you because that's who he is. That's what love does. It throws itself in front of cars. It takes the hit. And if we lose him, we honor that love by living, by being the kind of people who would do the same thing for someone else." "But I don't want to live without him," Hope sobbed. "First Daddy, now Mr. Isaiah. Everyone we love dies." Grace and Faith pressed closer, all three girls and their mother clinging to each other in the harsh hospital light. "Then we love anyway," Victoria said fiercely. "We love anyway because the alternative is becoming hard and cold and dead inside. And that's not living, that's just existing. Mr. Isaiah taught us the difference." At 3 a.m, Dr. Chen emerged from surgery. Every person in that waiting room stood as one. "He's alive," the doctor said, and the room exhaled collectively. "But the head trauma was severe. He's in a coma. We won't know the extent of brain damage until he wakes up. If he wakes up." "Can we see him?" Marcus asked. "Immediate family only." Victoria stood. "I'm his fiancée. These are our daughters. He's our family." The lie came easily, felt true in every way that mattered. Dr. Chen looked at this white woman and 3 white children claiming kinship with the black man fighting for his life upstairs. He could have questioned it, could have demanded proof. Instead, he nodded. "Room 437, but he won't know you're there." "He'll know," Victoria said with certainty she didn't feel. "Somehow, he'll know." Isaiah looked small in the hospital bed, diminished by tubes and machines and the antiseptic smell of near death. His face was bruised, swollen beyond recognition. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound Victoria had ever heard that was more terrible than Michael's final breath. The girls approached the bed carefully, as if he might shatter if they moved too quickly. Faith climbed onto the bed first, curling against Isaiah's side with courage, the bear tucked between them. "Please don't leave us, Mr. Isaiah," she whispered. "We still need you. I still need you." Hope took his hand, so small in hers. "We didn't finish the daddy book. There's so many more stories. And you have to teach us about Harriet Tubman next. You promised." Grace, always the brave one, pressed her forehead to his and cried silently. "You promised you wouldn't leave. You promised. Everyone promises, and then they leave anyway. But you can't. You can't." Victoria stood at the foot of the bed, watching this man who'd walked into their shattered lives and glued the pieces back together, who'd taught her daughters how to grieve, who'd taught her how to live again, who'd become, somewhere in the chaos of healing, the person she couldn't imagine facing tomorrow without. "Isaiah," she said, her voice breaking on his name. "I know it's too soon. I know it's complicated. I know Michael's only been gone 10 months. But you need to know, we love you. I love you. All of you. Exactly as you are. And if you come back to us, I'll tell you that every single day for the rest of our lives. So please, please come back." The machines beeped steadily. Isaiah didn't move. Marcus stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his face. "Miss Sinclair, my dad told me last week that you all saved him as much as he saved you, that after Mom died, he felt like he was just going through the motion. But your family gave him a reason to love hard again. That's what Mom asked him to do before she died, to love harder, and he did, through you." They kept vigil through the night and into the next day. 48 hours, the doctor had said. 48 hours to determine if Isaiah Washington's story ended in a Boston hospital room or continued in the house where 3 little girls needed him desperately. At hour 47, with 1 hour left in the window between life and death, Isaiah's fingers twitched. Faith felt it first. "Mommy!" His hand moved. They crowded around the bed as Isaiah's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. His gaze wandered across their faces before landing on Hope. "The baby," he croaked. "Hope, is she—" "I'm okay," Hope sobbed, climbing onto the bed despite the nurse's protests. "I'm okay, Mr. Isaiah. You saved me." Isaiah's eyes filled with tears. "Good." "That's good." Then looking at all 3 girls. "Can't have you babies getting hurt. Not on my watch." Victoria broke down completely, pressing her face to his shoulder. "You could have died. You almost died." "But I didn't," Isaiah whispered, his hand coming up weakly to touch her hair. "Still got too much living to do. Got 3 little girls who need me. Got a woman I love who needs to hear me say it out loud instead of just thinking it." Victoria pulled back, staring at him. "Isaiah, life's too short for pretending, Victoria. I love you. I love this family. And if you'll have me, really have me, not as hired help but as family, I'm staying. Forever. If you'll let me." The girls erupted in joyous screams. Marcus laughed through his tears. Even Helen, standing in the doorway, smiled through her own grief at watching love persist despite everything trying to destroy it. "Yes," Victoria said, laughing and crying at once. "Yes." 1,000 times yes. "Good," Isaiah said, his eyes already drifting closed again. "'Cause I got plans. Gotta finish that daddy book. Gotta teach Hope about Harriet Tubman. Gotta make cornbread for Thanksgiving. Can't do any of that from a hospital bed." He fell back asleep, but this time the sleep looked peaceful. Healing. They had survived. Again. And somehow, in the brutal mathematics of loss and love that felt like its own kind of miracle. 3 weeks after the accident, Isaiah came home, not to his small Roxbury apartment, but to the Sinclair mansion, where a first-floor guest room had been converted into a recovery space. He was still weak, still healing, but alive in ways that mattered more than physical strength. The custody hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Helen Morrison sat in her lawyer's office, staring at photographs of her granddaughters at the hospital, their small bodies pressed against Isaiah's bed, their faces exhausted with love and terror. Her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Brennan, laid out the case with clinical precision. "We have documentation of Victoria's work hours, media coverage of the questionable caregiver situation, testimony from 3 former nannies. The accident itself proves the children were in danger under current supervision. A judge will see—" "Stop." Helen's voice was quiet but firm. "I need to tell you something about why I really filed for custody." Patricia waited, pen poised over her legal pad. "I lost my husband when my son Michael was 10 years old. Heart attack, sudden, no warning, and I became terrified, absolutely paralyzed with fear that I would lose Michael too. So I controlled everything, his schedule, his friends, his choices. I told myself it was protection, but it was fear wearing a mask." Helen's hands trembled as she continued. "Michael grew up resenting me. We were never close. And when he got sick, when the cancer came, he didn't tell me for 6 months. 6 months I could have had with my dying son, and he kept it from me because our relationship was so broken. Miss Morrison, when he finally called me, it was too late. I drove to Boston, but Michael was barely conscious. He died 2 days later, and I never got to tell him I was sorry. Never got to tell him I loved him more than my fear. Never got to be the mother he deserved." Patricia set down her pen. "And the custody case was never about the girls. It was about getting my son back. If I could control his daughters the way I controlled him, maybe I could undo the damage. Maybe I could prove I was a good mother after all. But I was doing the same thing all over again, letting fear masquerade as love." Helen pulled out her phone and showed Patricia the photos from the hospital. "Look at their faces. Those children love Isaiah Washington with the kind of devotion my son never felt for me. And Victoria, she's become the mother I never was. Present, vulnerable, real." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to drop the custody case, and I want to testify for them, not against them." Patricia looked at her client as if she'd lost her mind. "Miss Morrison, we have a strong case. If you testify for the defense, you're handing them the victory." "Good. They deserve it. My granddaughters deserve parents who show up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And that man, that remarkable man who nearly died saving hope, he's shown up in ways I never did for my own son." Helen stood, gathering her coat. "File the dismissal, and tell Mr. Sinclair's lawyer that I'd like to speak at the hearing, not as the petitioner, as a witness to what real family looks like." The courtroom was smaller than Victoria had imagined. Judge Sarah Blackwell, a black woman in her early 60s, presided with the quiet authority of someone who'd seen every variation of family dysfunction and still believed in redemption. Helen Morrison was called to testify first. She walked to the stand with the bearing of a woman who'd made peace with uncomfortable truths. "Dr. Morrison," the judge began, "you filed for emergency custody of your granddaughters. Can you explain your concerns?" "I can, Your Honor, but first I need to explain my mistakes." The courtroom fell silent. "I lost my son 10 months ago. And in my grief, I tried to claim his daughters the way I once tried to claim him, through control rather than love. I filed this custody petition not because the girls were in danger, but because I was terrified of losing them the way I lost Michael, terrified of being forgotten, terrified of dying alone with nothing but regrets." Helen's voice broke, but she continued. I blamed Victoria for not being at Michael's bedside enough when he was sick. But the truth is, Victoria was running the company Michael built, supporting the family Michael loved, being strong in the ways Michael needed. I blamed her because it was easier than admitting I'd failed my son long before he got sick. And, Mr. Washington? Judge Blackwell asked. Isaiah Washington is the finest man I've ever met, Your Honor. He saved my granddaughter's life. He taught those girls how to grieve without breaking. He showed Victoria that love doesn't end when someone dies. It just changes shape. And I tried to destroy him because he's black, because he's male, because he doesn't fit the narrow definition of what I thought a caregiver should be. Helen looked directly at Victoria. My son would be ashamed of me, for the prejudice, for the cruelty, for choosing fear over love. But more than that, he would be grateful to Isaiah and Victoria for giving his daughters what I never gave him, a family built on presence, not perfection. Judge Blackwell was silent for a long moment. Dr. Morrison, are you withdrawing your custody petition? Yes, Your Honor. Completely. Those girls belong with their mother and with Isaiah. They're thriving. They're loved. They're learning that family isn't about blood or appearances. It's about who shows up when life falls apart. Victoria felt Isaiah's hand find hers under the table. Marcus sat behind them, tears streaming down his face. The girls were at home with Pastor Williams, too young for courtroom drama, waiting to hear if their family would be torn apart. The judge called Victoria to the stand next. Miss Sinclair, tell me about your relationship with Mr. Washington. Victoria took a breath, choosing truth over propriety. Isaiah came to us when we were drowning in grief. My daughters had driven away 19 caregivers in 8 months. They were angry, destructive, unreachable. I was working 80 hours a week because facing my empty house was unbearable. We were a family in name only. And Mr. Washington changed that? He didn't change it, Your Honor. He walked through it with us. He taught my daughters that grief isn't something to fix. It's something to honor. He taught me that being present matters more than being perfect. He gave us permission to be broken and loved at the same time. The media has raised concerns about a male caregiver with young girls. The media raised concerns about a black male caregiver with white girls. Let's be honest about what this is really about. Isaiah's credentials are impeccable. His record is spotless. But he doesn't fit the stereotype of what people expect caregivers to look like. And that makes them uncomfortable. Judge Blackwell leaned forward. Miss Sinclair, if I allow this arrangement to continue, you understand you're taking responsibility for these children's welfare, their emotional development, their safety, their futures. Your Honor, I'm already responsible for those things. The question isn't whether Isaiah should be part of our family. He already is. The question is whether the law will recognize that family comes in forms that don't fit traditional molds. Isaiah was called last. He walked to the stand slowly, still healing from broken ribs, still moving carefully, but his voice was strong. Mr. Washington, Judge Blackwell said, why do you do this work? Because my wife asked me to, Your Honor. Ruth, she died 10 years ago from complications of diabetes. Before she passed, she told me not to let her dying make me stop living. She told me to love harder, to take care of other people's children the way we took care of our son, to make her life mean something more than just the ending of it. And the Sinclair family? Those girls saved me as much as I saved them, ma'am. After Ruth died, I was going through the motions, helping families, yes, but not really living. Then I walked into that mansion and found 3 little girls protecting their father's photograph like soldiers, and I saw myself, saw my own grief reflected back at me, and I realized Ruth was right. The opposite of grief isn't happiness, it's love. So I chose to love them. All of them. There are those who say your presence is inappropriate, that a male caregiver poses inherent risks. Isaiah met the judge's eyes steadily. Your Honor, I've been black in America for 52 years. I know what people see when they look at me, especially when I'm caring for white children. They see danger. They see impropriety. They see every stereotype society's taught them about black men. He leaned forward. But those little girls, they see Papa Isaiah. They see the man who taught them it's okay to miss their daddy, the man who makes cornbread and tells stories about Rosa Parks, the man who threw himself in front of a car to save Hope's life. That's what matters, not what strangers think, what the people who actually know me believe. Judge Blackwell reviewed her notes for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she looked up. Dr. Morrison, your honesty today took courage. Your willingness to admit fault, to choose your granddaughter's welfare over your own pain, that's the mark of growth. I'm going to recommend family therapy for all of you, including you. These children need their grandmother, just not at the expense of the family they've built. Helen nodded, tears of relief streaming down her face. Ms. Sinclair, Mr. Washington, I'm not going to pretend I don't see the complications here, the race dynamics, the gender expectations, the way this family doesn't fit neat categories. But I've been a judge for 23 years, and I've learned that the families that look perfect on paper are often the most broken, and the families that look unconventional are sometimes the ones held together by the strongest love. Judge Blackwell stamped her order. Custody petition denied. I'm ordering continued therapy for the children and monthly welfare checks for 6 months, but this family stays together. Because at the end of the day, these children are thriving, and that's the only metric that matters. Victoria collapsed against Isaiah, sobbing with relief. Marcus ran forward, embracing his father carefully. Helen sat in her seat, weeping quietly, grieving what she'd lost with Michael, but grateful for a second chance with his daughters. They walked out of the courthouse together, white and black, old and young, blood family and chosen family. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed. But they kept walking, because they'd won something more precious than a legal victory. They'd won the right to love each other without shame or apology. And sometimes, that's the only victory that matters. Thanksgiving came 2 weeks after the hearing. For the first time in nearly a year, the Sinclair mansion felt like a home preparing for celebration rather than a mausoleum preserving grief. Isaiah stood in the kitchen at dawn, moving slowly but steadily, his ribs still tender but healing. He'd woken before everyone else to start the cornbread dressing, the sweet potato pie, the collard greens simmered with ham hocks, the way his grandmother had taught him 60 years ago in a Chicago kitchen that smelled exactly like this one did now. Victoria found him there, humming an old gospel hymn while he worked. You should be resting, she said softly, not wanting to startle him. Isaiah turned, his smile lighting up the pre-dawn kitchen. Can't rest on Thanksgiving, woman. Too much cooking to do, too much to be grateful for. She crossed to him, wrapping her arms carefully around his waist, mindful of his healing body. They stood like that for a long moment, swaying slightly to music only they could hear. A year ago, Victoria whispered, I didn't think we'd survive. I thought grief would kill us all, one way or another. But you did survive. You all did. Because of you. Isaiah pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes serious. No, Victoria. We survived each other. That's what family does. We carry each other when the weight gets too heavy for one person alone. The girls thundered downstairs an hour later, still in their pajamas, drawn by the smell of Isaiah's cooking. Hope climbed onto a stool to help stir the cornbread batter. Faith set the table with Courage the bear supervising from a chair. Grace helped Victoria peel potatoes. both of them stealing glances at Isaiah to make sure he was really there, really alive, really staying. Helen arrived at noon, carrying a pecan pie she'd made herself and flowers for the table. She looked smaller, somehow, softer. The brittle edges grief had given her finally beginning to smooth. "I wasn't sure I'd be welcome," she said quietly at the door. Victoria pulled her into a hug. "You're family, Helen. Family's always welcome, especially when they're brave enough to change." Marcus came next, bringing his fiancée Alicia, a pediatric nurse with kind eyes and an easy laugh. Pastor Williams arrived with his wife, and half the congregation from St. Augustine Church followed, black families and white families and every shade between, all of them drawn by love for the man who'd spent his life loving their children. The dining room table wasn't big enough, so they set up folding tables in the living room where the girls had once built a fort around their father's photograph. That same photograph now sat on the mantel, surrounded by candles and new pictures. Isaiah with the girls on the swings, Victoria and Isaiah at the hospital, all of them together in front of the courthouse. Before they ate, Pastor Williams asked them to join hands. "Lord," he began, his voice rich with the cadence of a man who'd spent 70 years talking to God, "we gather today with grateful hearts, grateful for second chances, grateful for families that don't look like the pictures in magazines but are held together by something stronger than blood, by choice, by commitment, by love that refuses to quit even when quitting would be easier." "Amen," the room chorused. "We're grateful for Isaiah Washington, who taught us that healing doesn't mean forgetting, that you can honor the dead while choosing to live, that the opposite of grief isn't happiness, it's love." Isaiah's eyes filled with tears. Ruth would have loved this, he thought. This beautiful, messy, impossible family they'd built from broken pieces. "We're grateful for Victoria Sinclair, who learned that being a good mother means being human in front of your children, means showing them that strong people cry and broken people heal, and love is always worth the risk." Victoria squeezed Isaiah's hand, squeezed Helen's on the other side. "We're grateful for Grace, Faith, and Hope, 3 little girls who survived the worst thing children can face and came out the other side still capable of joy, still capable of trust, still capable of building forts to protect what they love." The girls beamed, Grace with tears on her cheeks, Faith clutching courage, Hope bouncing in her seat with barely contained energy. "And we're grateful for Helen Morrison, who showed us it's never too late to admit we were wrong, never too late to choose love over fear, never too late to become the person our loved ones needed us to be." Helen broke down completely, sobbing into her napkin while Victoria rubbed her back and whispered forgiveness Helen was still learning to accept. "So Lord, bless this food, bless this family, and help us remember that every day we're alive is another chance to love harder. Amen." Amen. They ate until they couldn't move, laughing and telling stories. Marcus shared memories of Ruth that made Isaiah smile through tears. Helen told stories about Michael as a boy that the girls had never heard, how he'd rescued a baby bird, how he'd stood up to a bully, how he'd always chosen kindness even when cruelty was easier. "He would love this," Helen said, looking around the crowded room. "My son always believed family was something you built, not something you were born into. He chose Victoria over my objections. And he was right. He saw what I was too afraid to see, that love doesn't follow the rules we think it should." "Tell us about when Daddy was little," Hope prompted. "Tell us the funny stories." So Helen did. Stories about Michael putting a frog in his teacher's desk, about him painting his bedroom walls with mud because he wanted to be an artist, about the time he tried to bake her a birthday cake at age 7 and nearly burned down the kitchen. The girls laughed, hungry for any piece of their father they could hold on to. As the sun set golden over Boston, Isaiah found Victoria on the back porch, watching the swing set sway empty in the November wind. "You okay?" he asked, settling beside her carefully. "I was just thinking about Michael, about how he'd be glad we're here, glad we survived, glad the girls are laughing again." "You think he'd approve of us?" Victoria turned to look at this man who'd become everything to her family. "I think Michael knew what it meant to choose love despite what other people thought. And I think he'd want his daughters to see that modeled. That you don't stop loving because someone dies. You just learn to love differently." Isaiah reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Victoria's breath caught. "I know it's only been a year," Isaiah said quietly. "I know people will say it's too soon. I know Michael's memory is still so present in this house, in your heart, in those girls upstairs. But Victoria, I don't want to replace what you had. I want to build something new alongside it, something that honors the past while choosing the future." He opened the box. The ring was simple, elegant, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "Ruth's birthstone was sapphire," Isaiah explained, "and Michael's was diamond. I had it made special, so we're carrying both of them with us. So this isn't about forgetting or replacing. It's about remembering and adding. About making room for old love and new love to exist together." Victoria's vision blurred with tears. "Isaiah, Victoria Sinclair, will you marry me? Will you let me be a father to those 3 miracles upstairs? Will you give me the honor of building a family that proves love is stronger than grief, stronger than prejudice, stronger than every voice that says, 'We don't fit'?" "Yes." The word came out broken, beautiful. "Yes? 1,000 times, yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, and they kissed there on the porch where Michael used to play with his daughters, where grief had once seemed insurmountable, where healing had slowly taken root. The back door burst open. 3 girls tumbled out, Grace leading the charge. "Did he ask? Did you say yes? Are you getting married?" Victoria laughed through tears. "How did you—" "Papa Isaiah told us this morning," Hope announced proudly. "He asked if we thought Daddy would be okay with it. And we said yes because Daddy would want us to be happy." "Papa Isaiah?" Victoria looked at Isaiah, who shrugged sheepishly. "They started calling me that last week. Said Mr. Isaiah felt too formal for family." Faith approached shyly, still holding courage. "Mommy, does this mean Papa Isaiah lives here forever now? Like, really forever? Not just helping forever, but family forever?" "Family forever, baby." All 3 girls screamed and launched themselves at Isaiah and Victoria, nearly knocking them over. They stood there tangled together, this family that shouldn't work on paper, this family that had been forged in fire and grief and the stubborn refusal to let sorrow win. Inside, through the window, they could see Helen and Marcus and Pastor Williams and all the others who'd witnessed their healing. Helen raised her glass in a silent toast, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of grief this time, but tears of gratitude that she'd lived long enough to see redemption. The wedding was small, held in the backyard on a June morning when everything was blooming. They'd restored Michael's swing set completely, added a garden around it, planted flowers that would come back year after year. It had become their sacred space, the place where past and present coexisted, where they could talk to Michael and celebrate Isaiah, where nothing was forgotten, but everything was forgiven. Grace, Faith, and Hope wore matching lavender dresses and carried bouquets of Michael's favorite flowers, sunflowers, because he always said they reminded him of his daughter's smiles. They walked down the makeshift aisle first, solemn and proud, their father's picture pinned to their dresses in tiny lockets. Victoria wore a simple cream dress, nothing like the elaborate gown she'd worn when she married Michael. That had been a different life, a different love. This was quieter, deeper, built on shared survival rather than youthful optimism. Isaiah stood at the altar in his best suit, Marcus beside him as best man. Helen sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes, having walked Victoria down the aisle because Michael couldn't and because Helen had earned the right through hard change. Pastor Williams married them, his voice warm with joy. We're here today to witness something rare and precious, a family choosing itself. Victoria and Isaiah didn't fall in love the way movies tell us love happens. They built love, brick by brick, tear by tear, through hospital rooms and courtrooms and dark nights of the soul. They built love by showing up when showing up was the hardest thing they could do. He turned to the girls. Grace, Faith, Hope. Do you accept Isaiah as your papa? Do you promise to let him love you, guide you, and be there for you even when things are hard? We do, they chorused, giggling. And do you accept that he's not replacing your daddy? That there's room in your hearts for both? We do, Grace said seriously. Papa Isaiah taught us that love doesn't run out, it multiplies, like Jesus with the fishes and bread. Laughter rippled through the small gathering. Isaiah and Victoria exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Victoria, Isaiah began, his voice thick with emotion. You taught me that a heart broken open can hold more love than a heart that's never been broken at all. You taught me that showing up is the most radical act of love there is. I promise to keep showing up, in joy and sorrow, in health and sickness, in the easy times and the impossible ones. I promise to honor Michael's memory by loving his daughters with everything I have. And I promise to love you, not in spite of your grief, but including it, all of you, forever. Victoria's hands shook as she spoke. Isaiah, you walked into chaos and saw possibility. You saw 3 broken children and a shattered mother, and you didn't try to fix us. Yeah, you just sat with us in the broken places until we learned how to stand again. You taught me that being strong doesn't mean not falling apart. It means falling apart with people who'll help you gather the pieces. She paused, looking at Michael's picture on the girls' lockets. Michael was my first great love, and I'll carry him always. But you, Isaiah, you're teaching me that the heart has infinite capacity, that I can love Michael's memory and love you, living and present at the same time. I promise to choose us every day, to build this family with intention and grace, to honor where we've been while embracing where we're going. Pastor Williams pronounced them married. The girls cheered. Marcus hugged his father. Helen stood and applauded, her face transformed by genuine happiness. As Isaiah kissed his wife, the late afternoon sun caught Michael's photograph, making it gleam. Victoria sent a silent thank you to the man who'd loved her first, who'd given her 3 beautiful daughters, who'd taught her that love was always worth choosing. And she felt, though perhaps it was only imagination, only hope, only the human need to believe in something beyond goodbye, she felt Michael's presence like a blessing, like permission, like a father whispering to his daughters, "It's okay to love again. It's okay to be happy. That's what I always wanted for you." 2 years later, Victoria stood in that same backyard, now transformed by Isaiah's careful tending into a garden worthy of Martha Stewart magazine. She was 7 months pregnant, her hand resting on the gentle swell where their son grew. The girls, now 8 years old, were practicing a dance routine on the lawn, Grace leading, Faith adding creative flourishes, Hope providing enthusiastic if chaotic energy. They'd started calling themselves the Sinclair Washington Sisters, hyphenating their identity the way modern families did, claiming all their histories as valid. Isaiah emerged from the house carrying Lemonade and the completed Daddy book, now professionally bound into a beautiful leather volume. They'd published it, donating all proceeds to a foundation for grieving families. It had become a bestseller, helping thousands of children process loss. "You should see the letters," Isaiah said, settling beside her on the porch swing Michael had built a lifetime ago. Families from all over the country, saying the book gave them permission to grieve honestly, to love their lost ones while making room for new love, to be messy and broken and healing all at once. "Michael would be proud," Victoria said softly, "that his story, our story, is helping others." Speaking of stories, Isaiah pulled out a new blank journal. "I was thinking, when this little man arrives," he touched her belly gently, "he's going to want to know about his big brother, about Michael, about how this family came to be. So I thought we'd start a new book, a Michael Isaiah book, where we teach him about both his fathers." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, the easy tears of pregnancy, of happiness, of a heart finally healed enough to hold both joy and sorrow simultaneously. "Both his fathers," she repeated. "I love that." Helen arrived for Sunday dinner, as she did every week now. She'd become the grandmother she'd never been to Michael, present, supportive, interested in her granddaughters' lives without trying to control them. She brought flowers and stories, patience and apologies, showing up even when showing up was uncomfortable. Marcus and Alicia came too, now married themselves, Alicia pregnant with their first child. The cousins would grow up together, this next generation knowing nothing but the blended, beautiful, complicated reality of family built on choice rather than obligation. They gathered around the table, black and white, old and young, blood family and chosen family, grief survivors and hope builders. Pastor Williams blessed the meal with his usual poetry about second chances and stubborn love. Grace raised her glass of apple juice solemnly. "I want to make a toast to Daddy Michael, who taught us that love never dies, and to Papa Isaiah, who taught us that new love doesn't erase old love, and to Mommy, who's brave enough to hold both, and to baby brother," Hope added, "who's going to have the best family in the whole world because we already know how to love people even when it's hard." They clinked glasses, this impossible family, and through the window the late afternoon sun illuminated Michael's photograph on the mantel, surrounded now by new pictures, wedding photos and pregnancy announcements and images of healing. That night, after everyone had gone home and the girls were asleep, Victoria and Isaiah sat on the back porch, watching fireflies dance in the summer darkness. "Do you think we did right by him?" Victoria asked quietly. "By Michael? Do you think he'd approve of all this?" Isaiah took her hand, his thumb tracing the ring that held both sapphire and diamond, Ruth and Michael, old love and new. "I think Michael loved you enough to want you happy, loved his daughters enough to want them whole. And I think wherever he is, heaven or memory or the love we carry in our hearts, he's smiling. Because we didn't let grief win. We didn't let prejudice win. We didn't let fear win. We chose love again and again and again. That's the greatest honor we could give him." Victoria leaned against Isaiah's shoulder, feeling their son move beneath her hand, listening to her daughters breathe peacefully in their beds above, remembering the man who'd started it all and grateful for the man who'd helped them survive. "We did it," she whispered. "We built something beautiful from broken pieces." "We did," Isaiah agreed, "and we'll keep building. Every day. That's what family does. We keep choosing each other. We keep showing up. We keep loving harder than the world thinks possible." Above them, stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. And if Victoria imagined one burned a little brighter than the others, if she imagined Michael up there watching over them all, giving his blessing to this strange and sacred family, well, some truths live in the heart, not in evidence. Some truths we choose to believe because believing them makes us better than we were before. And love, stubborn, persistent, transformative love, is always the truest truth of all. Sometimes the people who save us look nothing like we expected. This story isn't just about a billionaire widow and a black caregiver. It's about all of us who've lost someone we couldn't imagine living without. It's about discovering that grief doesn't mean we stop living. It means we learn to live differently. Victoria thought her daughters were broken beyond repair, that her own heart would never heal. But Isaiah taught them something profound. Love doesn't run out when someone dies. It multiplies. The capacity to honor who we've lost while opening our hearts to new connections, that's not betrayal. That's survival. That's courage. Michael's memory didn't fade when Isaiah arrived. It became sacred, preserved in a daddy book, spoken aloud without shame, woven into the fabric of their new family. And Helen, she proved it's never too late to admit we were wrong, to choose connection over control, to become the person our loved ones needed all along. This family shows us that second chances exist, that prejudice can be unlearned, and that showing up, especially when it's hard, is the most radical act of love. Have you ever had someone unexpected walk into your life and change everything? What would you tell someone who's afraid to love again after loss? Share your story in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.